I can go for the world's title, baby. I can go for the national title if I want to. But guess what? Ricky ain't about just taking titles. I'm about taking this up to another level that you never seen before, okay?
Avoiding disaster, throwing Ricky Starks across the ring, trying to go for that tornado DDT, but oh, talk about heavy hands from Trevor Murdoch. Ooh.
The Four Sisters on Thumb Street on the end of Trevor Murdoch's arm, taking Ricky Starks to task.
This is the boot. Oh, that's one for flinching.
You played that game too, huh?
But there it is. Crucifix. Is it? What a win.
Here is your winner, Ricky Starks.
Well, just that quick. His agility played a big part in it. Ricky Starks was able to go up and crucifix Murdoch and take him down, Joe.
It was quite a maneuver there by Ricky Starks. He managed to out-wrestle Trevor Murdoch, the veteran. That's a very impressive start for Ricky Starks here on Power.
Ricky Starks excited. Uh-oh.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on.
Good job, kid. It just wasn't my night.
Now that's a pro, my friend, a professional wrestler walking away from us. Fantastic win. You know, he's a champion many times over.
Yeah, that ain't lost on me. And I know that people got good days and they got some bad days. But that man right there just proved that even if you got him, at least walk out with some dignity. And he did just that.
All right, Ricky. Tell all the people here and around the world watching, what are your goals here in the National Wrestling Alliance?
I got a lot of goals, and I'm not gonna pinpoint myself to just one or two. I can go for the world's title, baby. I can go for the national title if I want to. But guess what? Ricky ain't about just taking titles. I'm about taking this up to another level that you never seen before, okay? Here's the thing. People, men call me Absolute Ricky Starks. The ladies call me Stroke Daddy. And I'm so glad that finally I get the platform that I have been needing. Actually, it's not that I needed it, Marquez, it's that God just didn't have it in the plans just yet. And I know everybody out there is watching, they say, man, Ricky, you're real attractive, you're really sexy. And I know that you, Marquez, between you and I know that you wish you could be like me. And even though you can't, that's okay, I won't judge you any differently. Because God didn't have a lot of beauty left over when he was done with me. So I can't blame you if you look like this, or if you look like the cameraman. Ricky still got love for you either way. Now, I eat this business, and I sleep this business. I am too blessed, so that's why I stay dressed from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. And yeah, Ricky may act a little funny, but at the end of the day, I'm counting your money, all right?
Okay there. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ricky Starks.
Well, hello, you beautiful people. This is Gary Horton. This is the NWA. I'm not going to waste too much time with an intro because I'm probably just going to tack this at the beginning of This is the NWA Weekly, which is a brand new show we're doing. You're going to hear a lot more about that in just a second. But we had to make a new little section here. We decided to get back together, and normally I think the show would probably drop on a Monday, but instead we're going to be dropping it on a Tuesday this time because Monday was too big a day. It would have got lost in the sauce, to quote a man in the NWA, Eli Drake. This is a big deal today because we found out that Ricky Starks, former television champion, Nick Aldis' #1 draft pick, one of the great breakout talents, as far as everybody you see in the NWA, people from the past, people with more status. Ricky Starks was like the rookie, and nobody knew who he was once this thing started, and he quickly rose in the ranks and became one of the most popular people on the roster. And today we found out he was on Busted Open Radio today and announced officially that he was no longer employed by the National Wrestling Alliance. He chose not to re-sign his contract, and he is now a free agent. So we had to jump back in here. I am, of course, joined by Robert Stinson and Will Martin, and we just wanted to take a second to talk about this. Guys, whoever wants to jump in here, what are you thinking? Ricky Starks is gone.
This is a tough one for me. I people who know me, and I mentioned this yesterday on will show that people know me know that Aldis's opinion carries a great deal of weight with me. He's earned that right to carry that weight, and this was his number 1 draft pick, and so this is a major loss for the NWA. I don't fault anybody for seeking to advance himself. I don't think anybody in the NWA has that mindset. But this is a guy who the sky was the limit for him. He was the first NWA World Television Champion for a reason. That wasn't by accident. And like you said, Gary, this is somebody who emerged from obscurity into being one of the most prominent, promising, enigmatic, captivating, best talkers. I mean, just he was a pleasure, an absolute pleasure and a thrill. Every time you listen to him, you just got pumped up. Watching him in the ring was a work of art every time. And man, that's a big loss. I'm sad. I mean, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. Trust me. But I'm sad that even though he will always be in the NWA family, he's not going to be formally with the organization anymore.
Right after you said that,
yeah, Rob, I went through the whole.
You could go ahead, Will. I'm sorry, I just jumped in there.
I'm here too, Gary.
I'm sorry.
I went through the whole, gamut of emotions. I feel like, there was shock at first when I heard about it in our Discord channel, actually. And just like, I didn't want to believe it at first. And I'm like an investigator. That's a weird word. I'm more of like a researcher. I like to have facts. And so I went and actually wanted to hear it for myself. And so I went and listened to the interview about 30 minutes after it took place. And, it was interesting because he actually didn't start off with that. They introduced him as the NWA, wrestler, Ricky Starks. They talked about it for a while. And it wasn't until like the middle to the tail end of the actual interview that he said, oh, I'm actually no longer with the NWA. And it was very, sincere, and it didn't sound like there was any bitterness or remorse or anything. And so, he said it was mutual. His contract was up, and that was that. And so, just like Rob said, I don't fault anybody or hold it against them for, trying to advance their career or, get a bigger platform. I think he's earned it. He came in, as you said, Gary, relatively unknown, made a big name for himself, in my opinion. I remember I think it was the first episode of Powerrr. He was on there, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
And I was like, who's this guy? And then he wrestled a match, and then he got on the mic, and I was like, who's this guy? Like, it was just, so I was bought into him, really from the first time I saw him. And the more I watched it, the more I bought into him. So I was shocked, and then I was depressed, and then I was a little bit happy for him just as a human, because I love to see people, improve themselves. And I'm not saying where he's going to go is an improvement, because obviously the NWA, in my opinion, is the top of the chain. But for a guy like Ricky, he's definitely going to get a bigger audience if he goes somewhere with a TV deal or something like that. So, I don't fault him for that. I don't think, he's betraying us or anything like that. I do wish him the best, but, at the same time, man, it's a huge loss. And when wrestling does start back up on a weekly basis, and we get live wrestling, he is going to be sorely missed on NWA Powerrr for sure.
My mind keeps floating back to right after he won the television title at Hard Times. He had that interview. I think it actually was after show, like filmed kind of thing, but where he talks about people are going to have to be out here. I'm going to have people calling me Tempur-Pedic with as many people as slept on me. But he's like, I'm here. I've established myself. And he just broke out this like amazing promo in there. I'll probably just have to even cut it in here, but
history has been made. The build-up's been for weeks now, even months. Ricky Stark standing next to me. You've said it from the moment you stepped foot in the NWA. You needed gold on that shoulder. And tonight, Hard Times, the first ever of this generation television champion.
Man, let me tell you something about Hard Times. Hard Times is doing 3 matches in a night. Hard Times is going toe-to-toe with Trevor Murdoch. Hard times is standing right here before you. It's hard times for everybody now that Ricky Starks is the new TV champion. You understand what I'm saying? That's what hard times is. We in a new era right now. I'm the bridge. You know what I'm saying? I'm the bridge from the old to the new. If you got doubts about me, you better check yourself. If you asking about me, you better ask yourself. All right? That's the thing. Nobody gonna stop this. It's been 9 years in the making. 9 long damn years in the making, all right? You might as well call me a Tempur-Pedic, how much all these people done slept on me, but we not talking about that right now. We talking about this. We talking about crowning a new champion. We talking about setting a new lineage and a new era. Everything in the past, hey, I salute you, but guess what? It starts with me, and it starts right now. And there ain't nobody that can tell me different. You know why? Because I'm absolute Ricky Starks. I'm stroke daddy, Ricky Starks. Put a quarter in your ass because everybody who doubted me, you played yourself.
Congratulations, champ.
Dude, that promo he cut after then, more than ever, I was like, God dang, this guy is a star. He deserves everything he gets. Like, he is legit. And, I mean, you know, I hate to say, I mean, I hope the NWA hasn't slept on him, you know, like I hope, you know, they're not, I'm sure, I mean, the thing is, and obviously all of this would be speculation for anything that we have to say about it. But, you know, I'm sure there's some kind of a balancing act you're having to play right now as far as with the situation and the way that it is. And the NWA probably has so much money to play with. And maybe whatever that dollar amount was, I mean, clearly that's got to be the obvious answer. Whatever the dollar amount was the amount that it needed to be to keep Ricky Starks around. And Ricky thinks enough of himself that he thinks he can get more in the open market out there. And so obviously he did not re-sign. Guys, I mean, we kind of talked about this on Hey It's Will Daily last night, but where do you see, or what do you see for Ricky Starks' future from here? Will, what are you thinking?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I just said, I mean, I think the most natural movement for him is to a bigger stage. And I mean, you know, a wider audience, which would be a cable television deal. Personally, I would not want to see him in WWE NXT. I think that that's where too many great self-made superstars go to die, and their gimmick goes to die. And so I think he's put so much work, and I personally, honestly, I would be shocked if he did sign there because of all the work. I mean, you go into his social media accounts, the work and the money that he's putting into his own promos and videos and things. I mean, he put an incredible video out today after being on the radio and making the announcement. You know, just alluding to his free agency that was just, I mean, it was phenomenal. Like, it was very well done. And he's putting so much time and energy and money into that. I just can't see him going somewhere that's going to just wipe the board clean and start over with him, which is what I would assume WWE would do. So honestly, my best guess is AEW. He's got the relationship with Sammy Guevara that's established, that's public. Everyone knows about that, so that wouldn't be a shocker. I think they'd have good chemistry working together, either opposing each other or as a team. And so I think the most natural place for him to go would be AEW.
Rob, what about you?
I agree. I mean, there's a certain, you know, selfish part of me that wants to see him stay close to home with Ring of Honor or something like that. But like we said last night, AEW is not too far removed from home. There's a great kindred spirit between the AEW and the NWA. I mean, there's a mutual respect between the two. And like you, Will, I would love to see him reunite in some fashion with Sammy, their friendship being what it is. And I think just he would be, given his attitude, his ability to talk, the spectacle that he brings, he would be a great addition to the Inner Circle, man. I could see him on that T-shirt, man, that Guns N' Roses style T-shirt. He would be perfect. And, you know, and going back to what you were saying, Gary, the money certainly has to play a role. I mean, the NWA, we all know, is not funded by a multi-billionaire. You know, we've got our resources, but we don't have their resources. But the other thing is that, you know, a guy like Ricky wants to work and he wants to wrestle. And right now we don't have a lot of activity going on because of circumstances outside of our control. But the AEW is pushing on and continuing to produce content, you know, at their level with competition. And that has to be, I would suspect, that has to be an attraction to somebody like Ricky as well, being as competitive as he is. So, those things come into play. But my guess is, I'd like to see him in the AEW.
Outside of Ricky Starks, I think the next obvious question has to be, while we're on the topic, is that this marks the second person that has signed with someone since this whole quarantine, the pandemic has happened. I mean, we also lost another up-and-comer. She hadn't made quite the same amount of impact as Ricky Starks had, but Tasha Steelz, who looked to have a lot of promise, a brand new talent face, she has signed now with Impact Wrestling. And so that leaves behind the NWA for her too. How do you see, do you see the NWA being able to pivot? You feel good about everything still, even though they're losing this? What do you think their chances are as far as losing more? Where are you guys at as far as the brand goes right now? Rob, what are you thinking?
A lot of this will come out tomorrow with Carnyland, and there's been a lot of speculation about the direction. I think the NWA is on firm footing. I hate to see Tasha Steelz go. We have the most vibrant women's division, and Tasha Steelz was a big part of that. Impact to me, they're very close to home. I don't think that we've seen the last of her in the NWA. Being under contract doesn't mean that her NWA days are over any more than Marty Scurll being a Ring of Honor guy means that he won't appear, obviously, in the NWA. So that's not as sad a move for me as a Ricky Starks going and leaving and going potentially to some place like the AEW where that's going to consume him, and it's not likely until that contract, presumably, if that were to happen, expires, he wouldn't be back. But no, I don't. I think David Lagana and William Patrick Corgan are very deliberate about what they're doing. They have to manage resources and personnel very strategically right now, and you're going to keep what they view as we have no clue. None of us know what Carnyland is. We're going to be enlightened tomorrow and have a better sense on the direction. But I think that whatever happens, again, Corrigan and Lagana, they have a good sense of what the fan base is craving, what's going to sustain the business, and I don't have any fear or any discomfort about the direction.
Will, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said, Rob. I have nothing but faith in the leadership and the creative direction of the NWA. I think, I said this on our Discord channel earlier that, if anything, this just shows that the NWA is a platform for people to come make a name for themselves. Because they didn't throttle Ricky Starks. They let him be who he was. That was very obvious. It was very obvious in his interview this morning that he's got nothing but good feelings about the NWA. Contract agreements are contract agreements, and that's business. And business is business. It's not personal. And so I think it was obvious, that he's got nothing but good feelings about the NWA. And I believe that's because they gave him the freedom to create the character that he is now. And hopefully he can take that and use it somewhere else. So, if anything, this is encouraging for us as NWA fans because it proves that, what Corrigan and Lagana have set out to do when it comes to a wrestling organization in 2020, because that doesn't exist anywhere else, guys. Like, no other wrestling organization is having that much success as a platform, creating these personas and giving these guys a platform. So the NWA is accomplishing what it's setting out to do. They're creating big personalities. They're creating big characters by letting these guys be themselves, which is something that we haven't seen. I haven't seen as a mainstream wrestling fan in years. And so that's reassuring to me. And so, not to sound harsh or dismissive of Ricky Starks, because as I said, it's going to be a huge loss. But at the same time, I've got nothing but faith that the next Ricky Starks is about to step into the NWA, and hopefully we're not talking about him leaving. But on a couple weekly episodes away, we might be saying, "Man, this guy's here and he's incredible. We didn't even know who he was." And so they're creating that platform, and I think he is a testament to the fact that it's working.
Well said. Well said. Well, folks, I mean, obviously, things are up in the air right now with the NWA, and we're sitting here right on the cusp of Carnyland. We'd love to know what you think about the Ricky Starks situation, Tasha Steele's situation, where the NWA is, and how they're going to pivot from here. Please make sure you drop that in the comments down below. If you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening to this on the podcast, just go ahead and hit us up on social media at the NWA Pod. We'd love to know what you guys think. And speaking of Carnyland, that's a brand new show. We're going to be talking about it right after that happens. Probably 8:30ish, I guess, if things go as planned. We'll go live, and we'll be here to talk to you guys directly about Carnyland. But speaking of new shows, also, we have a brand new show, which is also what's coming right after this part, which is This is the NWA Weekly, where we're going to cover the top news in the NWA. So don't go anywhere. Rob, Will, thank you so much for sitting down with me real quick so we could do the breaking news segment of This is the NWA Weekly.
Oh.
You guys have a good night. Well, enjoy the rest of the show, everybody.
Yeah.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to, okay, I'm going to start over. I'll probably leave this part in. I don't know. First episode of This is the NWA Weekly, and I've already screwed it up.
Hello,
Setting the bar low.
This is Gary Horde, and this is the NWA, the podcast celebrating the past, present, future, history, legacy, and tradition of one of the greatest pro wrestling entities of all time. We're talking about that National Wrestling Alliance, and I'm here with my co-hosts, the lovely Will Martin and the gorgeous Robert Stinson.
Oh, I like that. Gorgeous Robert Stinson.
He's definitely the most gorgeous of the three.
I agree with that 100%. Just a very, very pretty man.
Thanks, bro. Okay. Hey, we can stop the show now. I gotta stop you right there, though, Gary. Because you always, I've been listening to This is the NWA podcast for a long time in the gym in the morning, working on all this, and you always say one of the greatest entities. You got to change that, man. It is. There's no argument. It is the greatest entity of all time.
Okay. Is that the first order of business on this podcast? The first order of business is we change the intro.
There's room in the world for the WWE, for AEW, for Impact, for Ring of Honor, for this and that. Those are all great things. The wrestling world is vibrant, but let's not fool ourselves. The National Wrestling Alliance is not one of the greatest. It is the greatest.
I am right now making a note that I need to change that Robert Stinson has been part of This is the NWA for a week and is already asserting himself. So. All right. Well, fair enough. So we will work on that. I agree with you. I mean, personally, I think it is the greatest entity. I think I see what I appreciate about you guys is that you help me overcome like I try to ease into things and you guys like just bash right through. So that's cool stuff. So anyway, this is our first technical episode. I did this a while back on the podcast. I would try to do this when things were going on. I would drop like, tour dates or like, whatever, like appearance dates and places where people of the NWA were going to be and that sort of thing. I thought that that'd be really helpful. And I think that This is the NWA Weekly needs to come back because one of the things, I mean, when things get back going, that'll be a nice feature to have. But we're thinking of with this show right now is that one of the beautiful parts of the NWA in general is not only do they constantly put out really, really cool content, and they've been managing to do it every single week, even during all of this. The other thing is that their fan base constantly puts out really cool content as well. I don't know if I even know of another brand who has it like that. Like just the creativity that goes on in the NWA just from the fans themselves. So I thought this would be, I think what we talked about was this would be a good way to not only mention the extra stuff that the talent from the NWA is doing, but also the stuff that the fans of the NWA are doing. So I think that's kind of what we settled on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it's interesting because during this, the whole quarantine crisis, COVID-19, it's not only, you have a lot of talent-driven content, but the fans have kind of been carrying some of the weight as well and producing content for the audience to digest.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, I think what sets the NWA apart, there are a lot of daily, WWE content producers, but those are businesses. I mean, these are people doing it full time. The NWA has absolutely the most content being put out by fans like us, like the three of us. Like we're doing this not as a career. We're doing this because we freaking love the National Wrestling Alliance and for no other reason. And we want to talk about it. We want to incorporate other people. We want to start community. And I definitely don't see that in any other organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Just this organic production like this. It's really, really cool to see. We've been calling it hashtag NWA fam. We've been using that. And like I said, not even, I mean, it is the fans, which I think is the coolest part, just that the fans are in it. But the talent roster from the NWA is being very, very consistent here lately too with putting out stuff. So I think that unless you're just right on top of it, you're probably not even going to catch every single thing that comes out in a week from the NWA community. So that's kind of what this will be for, is we can kind of talk about the latest news, the latest happenings. Obviously you can tune into Will's show and get like some news updates mostly, but if you just want like a weekly roundup, here we are, and we're going to point you to, I think we'll link down in the comments to, or in the description to these things so that you can easily go check out everybody's stuff, like what they're doing. And anyway, so I've got a list of 10 here that I wanted to get to this week that I thought were very, very cool and worth mentioning. And as we go along, if you guys think of something that I missed, which is always a possibility, please let me know. And that goes for all of you out there as well. If you're watching this right now and you think we miss anything during this, by all means, please let us know. Or what do you want to see out of this show? This is where we're at right now. This is what we're thinking is the best way to go. But if you have ideas, we are open to suggestion. Just make sure you hit that subscribe button down there. And you can catch all of these. There's a little bell. Click that. It lets you know every time one of these episodes drops. And we're going to be listening. We're going to be here to interact with you and find out what you want to hear from This is the NWA Weekly. But let's jump right into number one, and I'll stop rambling. So number one on the list today, and these are in no particular order, I do want to say, by the way, because they're all very special things and hold very special places in our hearts. But number one that I wanted to bring up this week is the Alliance blog. That's alliance-wrestling.com. Jason Callie over there celebrated just this week that he has been running that website that's been covering the NWA for 13 years. So this is obviously well before the Corgan and Lagana era. This is back in Stinson, you probably know this, like Bruce Tharp or something back in those days. But that guy's been sticking with the NWA for a while. So you want to talk about dedication. I mean, we're just babies right now compared to what this guy's been doing.
Right. He is, you want to look at resources out there, and there are a lot of like educational resources. I'm thinking of like WCW Project, and of course, RJ's always putting some good stuff out there. But if you ask me, like the most essential resource as an academic resource interested and devoted to the history of the National Wrestling Alliance, the Alliance blog with J-Cal is tops. There's no competition. I mean, he's going to take you back through the Adam Pearce days. He's going to take you to what people are calling the wilderness. I know a lot of people don't like that, but man, he knows everything there is to know about NWA anarchy, all the sub-territories. When it really was, I mean, it was something resembling a territorial movement, and it was a really rich and vibrant time in history. But J-Cal has been there since all of that, since the split between WCW and NWA up to the present day. So if you want something, a resource that's going to connect the dots between, you know, Ric Flair and Sting and Dusty Rhodes and up to Nick Aldis, you got to go to JCal, man. He's an Alliance blog. It is the essential, the number one, including even ours, man. I mean, the Alliance blog is the most important resource out there for National Wrestling Alliance content, no doubt, bar none.
Yeah, and I've just recently become, you know, exposed to JCal as I'm, you know, just as you said, like a baby fan in the NWA. But you know, right as I started following, he put out, I think it was JCal's View or JCal, you know, whatever, and he was just really talking about the same thing we just opened the show with, the fact that there are so many great content contributors in the NWA fam, and he was putting them over by name and putting the links in the bio. And to me, you know, I've been listening to wrestling podcasts for a long time. I've been consuming that content, living it, you know, mainly WWE or AEW type stuff. And I've never, ever heard a podcast or anybody reference another that's a quote unquote competitor or perceived as a competitor. So to me, that spoke volumes. And as I get more familiar with his website and his blog and his content that he's putting out, I got to join a live chat before Superpower that he was doing and interact with him some, and that was really cool. So he's really accessible. He does have some great content, great historical content. So yeah, I can't put that guy over enough.
Yeah, you actually mentioned one of the things I definitely wanted to bring up about it is this week he definitely did release a post, a video that he streamed on his YouTube channel, which we'll link to, that was called Rising Tides Lift All Ships. And I thought that was a beautiful thing from him. And he definitely didn't have to do that, but to see him put over 10 pounds of podcasts, put over everybody that's doing anything. I think he even mentions, and they're worth mentioning, Project WCW's out there doing their thing. And I think they just combined, they were doing like a Project Territories and a Project WWF or something like that, and they're just combining it all into one thing, if I'm not mistaken. So it was cool to see somebody reference that. And yeah, so maybe just even in the back of my mind here, maybe that was an inspiration on why we're doing this too, just as a weekly guide to content that could come out. I wanted to spend one more second talking about him if I could, because I was perusing the site today, and what I wanted to do was I tried to go back and find the oldest thing I could find on his website. And so I found a press release going back that he was posting about and running down, which was for NWA Pro. And it was NWA Pro Australia. That was the first thing he covered. And Stinson will probably really appreciate this stuff. And maybe you can even guide us on who some of these people are. Some of them we're definitely going to recognize. But this event featured a national title tournament. In that tournament, the first round was going to be Rocky Romero representing Cuba versus Damian Slater representing Australia. Jimmy Payne from Australia versus Mikey Nichols from Australia. Davis Storm from Australia versus Bobby Marshall. Now, I've heard of Rocky Romero, but I haven't heard of any of these others. Now, here's a name. Representing Switzerland, Claudio Castagnoli.
Nice.
We'll recognize as Cesaro versus Spike Steele. So that was your first round of the national title tournament that was going on. They also had a USA versus Australia steel cage tag team match for the NWA tag team titles. That was Joey Ryan and Machine Gun Carl Anderson as the tag team champions. They were defending against Edward Vanderpyle and Jag Hartley Jackson. Don't know those guys. See, this is where I need to be educated, but I definitely know the names Joey Ryan and I know the name Carl Anderson. And never in a million years would I have pictured those two together as a tag team. They seem like two different kinds of dudes.
Can I just say that has reminded me that we need more steel cage tag team matches?
Holy crap, you're right. No, that's a good point. My favorite part of this, though, is the main event of the evening was this event was headlined by Sean X-Pac Waltman versus the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. So,
Wow.
very cool. NWA Pro. That was like
What was the year on that?
whatever, like 13 years ago was. I'm sorry, I don't know. So.
Yeah, J-Cal began around 2009, and there's always been a very vibrant NWA presence in New Zealand and Australia. And I believe Aldous has taken the belt there toward in Australia. Of course, Ric Flair's got many monumental matches there. Australia, New Zealand, that is NWA country fundamentally. And J-Cal reminds us of that.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And just those names alone, this is one of the things why somebody's site like his is important historically, because these are, again, like you said, some people don't like you calling it this for whatever reason, but the wilderness years of the NWA. And people don't forget like the names that have passed through the National Wrestling Alliance over the years. Like just everybody who's anybody, it feels like has like dipped their toe in the alliance at some point.
Right, yeah, and you look through those years, and you look at how the title has passed, even like through the NWA TNA Impact days. Every title holder has been somebody credible, from R-Truth to Raven to Sting to, we're not talking about backyard wrestlers here. We're talking about people who are credible athletes who have sustained the promotion through those years. Those are all world's champions, and they have my absolute respect.
Absolutely. So again, everybody, if you haven't already, that's alliance-wrestling.com. We'll link it in the description. J-Cal and the blog also are on all the social medias at the Alliance blog, so you should definitely check them out. Fellas, number 2 on the list I've got right here that I wanted to mention, and I'm kind of peppering these things in so it doesn't seem like we're just tooting our own horn here. But for number 2, hey, it's Will Daly has joined. This is the NWA. Will, thanks for joining. This is the NWA.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, number 3. Will's got a, if you haven't already, you'll see it on this channel. Will's got a very, very cool, well done, well edited, just tremendous daily blog, basically, of the goings on in the National Wrestling Alliance and around wrestling in general, which is something I appreciate. When we were first talking about it, that was the thing, as he was asking me, he was like, well, it's, obviously I love the NWA, but do you care if I talk about other stuff? And I'm like, nah, man, we got our center, but, talk about whatever you feel like talking about. And so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and my goal is to create, from an NWA fan's perspective, because we're not blind to the wrestling culture, because wrestling is a culture. Despite how you feel about WWE and AEW, the indies or anything like that, it's a culture, and we are all part of this culture. And so I wanted to create something just quick and daily that covers wrestling culture, but from the perspective of someone like me who is always going to primarily be an NWA fan. So I'm going to always make the tie-ins to NWA talent that I can make. I'm always going to look at it through the lens of, pure pro wrestling, which is what NWA is. And I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to be critical where, an NWA fan would probably be critical, and voice my opinion. And so it's been a lot of fun. I've been on this channel for, I think, a week. Exactly. I think a week tomorrow. So it's been a blast. I've had a great response. The biggest part of it has just been being able to connect with people, connecting with you guys, connecting with people on our Discord channel that we started, which has been a lot of fun. So I'm having a blast.
Well, we're happy to have you, Will. Stinson's not speaking up, so I assume he's not, but he'll get over it. I'm just kidding. There's not a lot to add to that. Will joins a long list of great podcasters and presenters out there. We got to talk about that. I haven't been putting hey, it's Will Daly in the podcast feed, but maybe I should. Like, it just seemed maybe it would work there. Actually, that's probably not a bad idea. You've got a lot of great visual gags, so I think that was where my hang up was before. Is you're very funny visually, not like your face, but just in general.
Well, we can't.
It's like, bro, I can't believe this isn't a place to guilt anybody, man.
We can't all look like Rob Stinson.
Oh, the Doctor of Love. That's it. He's over there with his lovely bandana and his hoodie, just looking cool as can be.
Well, we said we were all going to do bandanas tonight, man. Okay, it's not like
None of us said that.
It's like y'all say, hey, it's going to be a costume party, and I'm the only one that showed up in a costume.
Rob, I love that you just like jumped right into this this whole experience, and you were just taking over. Like you just are like, I'm controlling the dress code. I'm gonna change the intro. Like we're learning a lot right now on this first episode of This Is the NWA Weekly about Mr. Stinson.
Well, two things. First of all, point A, going back to Will, Gary, you mentioned a lot of times about how the NWA brings in that older crowd, the people that have been disconnected and have reconnected. Will is someone who's been a wrestling fan his whole life, but has been attracted to the NWA recently. And it's kind of the same dynamic, and you get a little bit of the taste. You're like, man, this is what I feel. I mean, this is like this narrative that's being played out is something that I really, really feel. And I say it, I've said it 5 or 6 times on previous shows, that it's like, comparing WWF or WWE to NWA, and no shade on anybody. The world's big enough. I like WWF, but that's fun. That's entertaining. But I feel the NWA. I like them, but I believe these people. And Will, that's what drew Will into it. Just like all these folks like myself who were watching in these late 70s and early 80s, mid 80s, they're being drawn back because that believability and the credibility. They don't take the intelligence of the fans for granted. I mean, they don't say take it for granted. They acknowledge the intelligence of the fans.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think I represent a pretty big portion of current WWE fans, at least people that I know that, they still watch it and they still semi-enjoy it. But I think me being more broad in what I cover, maybe I can capture some audience that aren't really aware of the connections to NWA. They're not aware of, that there's other options. And so, part of my goal is a little bit of marketing where it's like, hey, maybe I'll pull you in with a story about, the Revival because you know who they are, but I'm going to always put over the NWA at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was exactly where I wanted to go with it too, is that I think that there's a real opportunity with you opening up to the other wrestling area that maybe some people find out about the NWA just from what you're doing. So maybe it will help actually grow the base for NWA in the long run. So that's a good way of looking at it. Will, you're joined. It's worth mentioning you're not the only daily show out there. We want to give credit where it's due. Adam Rotella is out there with the 10 Pounds of Podcast. He's doing his NWA coffee every morning when you wake up. And, I don't know that he even intends to do it daily, but Last Minute Wrestling, Frank, am I going to say this right?
Mandolini.
Yeah. That guy's, I think this week had like 3 interviews pop out. This guy's been killing it. He's Italy.
Pushing out some good content.
Yeah.
Pushing out some fantastic interview with Brian Solomon, man. It was like, his Royce Isaacs one was top notch, and then he's doing a lot of names that are just emerging. But the Brian Solomon, we did the show with Brian Solomon. I'm a huge Solomon fan. He's a big advocate of the NWA. That fans, if you're watching, you need to go to Last Minute Wrestling and watch that podcast or listen to that. It's very enlightening.
Yeah, absolutely. Just this week he's had, like Mr. Sensen said, the Brian Solomon interview, which we've had on this show, and he's a great, just a encyclopedia of knowledge with wrestling. And then he also, he branches out as well. Like he had a Kid from NXT UK this week, and Ian Skinner from PBW. So that's like federation I've never even heard of personally, but obviously Frank has got the inside on some stuff overseas that we would not know about normally. And so that's kind of a cool treat if you're not familiar with stuff over in Europe and that sort of thing. You've got a good opportunity to get a handle on that just by listening to Frank's podcast. So shout out to the Last Minute Wrestling Podcast. Will, one more thing before we wrap up with, hey, it's Will.Daily. You mentioned something today that I thought was very interesting. We've seen Caleb Conley. I saw him on Instagram actually put something out about it. What do you guys have you guys both seen the stuff with the Revolt? For those who don't know, basically, I mean the short version is that obviously the Revival are no longer associated with the WWE, and they have come out and trademarked Fear the Revolt. It was kind of implied they were going to be called the Revolt, I feel like. Well, Caleb Conley and his partner, and his name escapes me, Zane Riley, is that right?
Yep.
They've been doing a tag team since like 2015 called the Revolt, and they've been working the independent scene specifically big time in the Carolinas. They're actually the tag team champions for one place. Do you guys have any thoughts on this whole thing? Obviously, I think the reason it popped up today is legal action has finally been pursued here.
Yeah, so I covered that today on the Daily Show. So I'll go ahead and give my take that I put on there. But, you know, I think it's funny because the response from FTR, as they're claiming is their name, the formerly known as the Revival, the report from their lawyer, or the response, was that they were never going to be called the Revolt. But I'm not sure why they trademarked Fear the Revolt. And he said, no, that FTR was just going to be a generic, it could stand for whatever, you know. And of course, if you're not familiar, FTR goes back, I think, all the way to the Young Bucks, even maybe in Ring of Honor, where they kind of had some social media feuds. And I won't say the word because we want to be a family show, but it basically stood for F the Revival. And they were saying, you know, that was kind of their hashtag that they started. And so the Revival took it and kind of made it their own thing as a gimmick. And so I guess they're pursuing that, keeping that FTR, but they were going to change it to Fear the Revolt. And so it was obvious that they filed for that trademark, that they were going to use that. And then their lawyers backpedaling after the cease and desist comes from Caleb and Zane's lawyer, you know, saying, oh, no, it was just going to be FTR. So to me, it seems like it's just this weird big dance that the lawyers are doing. And I think it's kind of petty. And as I said in my show, like, just come up with a new name. Like, there's a lot of names out there. Just do a new one. Someone else has that name, like, move on, you know?
Well, you kind of covered this in your Daily Show, but Caleb and Zane have said that they tried to reach out to these guys as friends, especially I think Caleb knows these guys probably pretty well. They all came from the same like Carolina scene and that sort of thing. So Caleb's essentially saying that they reached out to these guys and weren't getting anything, and so that's why now it's gone into the legal realm as far as that goes. So it's kind of interesting. I think the Revival, to be fair, to give both sides of it, they're formerly the Revival. They're saying that basically that they tried to just let them know we're not calling ourselves the Revolt, so it's cool. They say they offered to have like matches with them, like give them a couple of matches on the indie scene, that sort of thing. But now they're pursuing legal action, and that's not how friends act. And so it's become like this whole drama. Obviously, we're talking about it a little more because Caleb is a prominent member on the NWA roster. Mr. Simpson, do you have anything to add to this?
Nothing more than what Hey, it's Will said. I mean, he's spot on. It's petty. I mean, there's a lot of pettiness out there when it comes to it's petty. You know, I think Will summed it up. Those are my thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll say this. I mean, I would definitely side with the real Revolt. You know, Caleb and Zane, because you know they've been busting their ass for the last 5 years under that name. Like, it's just, you know, not trying to sound petty myself or like a little kid, but it is not fair for someone who's, been in the limelight to just come in and steal the name. And I think that's where they're coming from. So I don't know that, legal action wasn't their first course. It was, according to them, after they tried to reach out as friends and say, hey, what are you guys doing? And receive no response. And so they're just trying to protect what they've worked hard for. The indie scene in wrestling is not an easy job. It's not an easy circuit, and so they've been killing it out there for 5 years and earning titles under this name. I honestly don't blame them for taking legal action if they couldn't get some kind of amicable response, from those guys.
And this is not a questionable thing on if they've been using this or not. I mean, from the very first episode of Powerrr, I think that Caleb shows on, I believe his tights even reflect the Revolt logo that they've been using. And I've been lucky enough to have an opportunity to interview Caleb Carnyland. And I remember in that interview, we actually discussed the Revolt and what it meant to him and that sort of thing. And this is well before the Revival were no longer in WWE. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how this plays out, at least. All right, so I'm not going to dwell on that anymore. Let's move on to more fun stuff with our next topic of discussion. Let's talk about the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, Nick Aldis. He has a brand new YouTube channel, and we got his very first video this week. He is unboxing his brand new Nasir suit, custom made, the Nick Aldis line. Looking pretty sweet, too, I might add. Fellas, what'd you think of Nick Aldis's first video?
Oh man, and he's started a YouTube channel, so I'm anticipating more Nick Aldis content coming out. But it's just Nick Aldis being Nick Aldis, man. He's a national treasure. He brings that class, that pedigree, that it's going back. We mentioned this before, the Wales Wrestling Con panel that he was on, where the moderator said, it feels like whatever you're involved in seems important. It seems like the most important thing. And of course, Nick Aldis is going to have a line of suits. I mean, absolutely. and I hope my wife, the lovely Tanya Stinson's watching this, because I've got a birthday coming up. So one of those Nasir suits would look good on Rob Stinson come teacher in service here when we get back to school.
We don't need you getting any better looking, because then Gary and I are going to have to put on a collar or something, and I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, well, I will say, I'm interested in the suit as well. Don't get me wrong. I signed up for the email list. Right now, if you go to Nasir Suit's site that is linked through Aldis's video, and we can try to, again, link that in the description, you can just basically right now sign up for an email list. They're working on their online store. So I'm curious how much these suits are going to cost. He's very happy to admit that he's not making Ric Flair money. So he was real stoked about the bag, like the suit bag that they also sent him in the unboxing, which is very cool. I didn't even know was a thing, but that he talks about, he's not Ric Flair. He's not ashamed to admit he can't just go buy a new suit in every town that he has to go to. So this is very helpful. So I wonder if they're going to keep the price Gary friendly, I guess would be the word I'm looking for.
well, to that point, Gary, to your point, I think, when you think back to Ric Flair and Nick Aldis, the thing that makes them so captivating is that Ric Flair wasn't faking anything. Ric Flair was Ric Flair. He was authentic. There was no gimmick. And I feel that way with Nick Aldis as well. Nick Aldis isn't playing a role. He's not trying to be somebody he isn't. Nick Aldis is who he is. I mean, he's not hurting for resources, but he's not going to try. He's not imitating Ric Flair. He carries a lot of that same gravitas and that statesmanship, but there is no gimmick there. Nick Aldis is who he is. So.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, what I love about this and that being his first video is it's just on par with who he is, which is also on par with his character in NWA. I mean, he's authentic. And so it's just felt natural that he was unboxing a new suit. I mean, he's one of these guys, he wears a suit because he wants to wear a suit, not because the producers told him to or the writers told him to, which we've seen in other organizations before, where a guy shows up in a suit suddenly and you're like, well, that doesn't feel natural. For him, that's who he is. And so you could tell, the real happiness and joy of him unboxing that suit. To me, that was just, unveiling another layer of the realism of his character.
Boom. Same wavelength again, man. I was literally, as we're sitting here talking about it, and Rob was going through his last point, the image that came to mind was just the excitement in his eyes opening the box and just getting really excited about the tracksuit that also came along with it. Like, oh, look at how much heat I'm going to get for this. Like, like with his name on it. Like, that stuff's really cool. Like, it's genuine, and it's a guy who does like the fancy stuff, but he's still at a point where he's very appreciative, obviously, of this deal that he's got. Really cool pocket squares that has his name on it.
Yeah. Nick Aldis is a person who is refined. He's got a refined perspective. He's an educated man. He's a multi-talented man. He's cultured, but he's not a phony. He's not playing. I mean, there is no. And bottom line is, when you look through wrestling, the people that are most captivating aren't playing a role, man. You look at Zicky Dice. We spent an hour and 20 minutes with Zicky Dice. The world saw 15 minutes of it. Zicky Dice is Zicky Dice. He is who he is. I mean, that's why he's so captivating. These guys it's very little effort on their part because they are who they are. Nick Aldis is who he is. I mean, he is, and he's you saw the video there with the son. Family is very important to him. He's not out there, spending more money on spilt liquor than most people make in a year. He's not. This is a working champion. Who is a prize fighter, who is a family man, who is rooted, grounded, but who's still refining culture and still has a fine taste.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you mentioned what you just did, Rob, because the next point I wanted to bring up is that, again, to toot our own horn, Robert Stinson obviously is sitting here, but also your daughter, Piper, and her show, Piper's Notes, have joined This Is the NWA. And our very first episode that we get with you on the This Is the NWA channel happens to be with the television champion, Zicky Dice. Welcome, Rob. And Piper, out there, wherever you are.
Oh, she's been in bed for 2 hours now.
Well, you let her know we're excited.
Oh, she knows, man. And like I told you, I'm not trying to fanboy out here. I've been a Gary Horn and an Adam Rotella fan. When I first got exposed to this, it was Adam had been doing his 10 pounds before. Gary, you'd been doing This Is the NWA for a long time. But when I'd go in the morning to Planet Fitness to work out, that's not a Planet Fitness ad or anything. But
you just wanted us to make sure you knew you work out.
I mean, this stuff don't happen, bro. You got to work with it. But I would listen to Gary Horn every morning, man, and your interviews, the recaps. Just you've been doing this for a couple years, and so to come on here as a source that is a credible source, it's certainly entertaining, but it's not entertainment driven. This is an avenue for people who are serious wrestling fans to talk about serious wrestling matters. With serious wrestling personalities and serious wrestling issues. I'm so happy and proud to be with you and Will here in this alliance under the umbrella of This Is the NWA. Something that we want to bring to the table is our interest to show that wrestling, professional wrestling, the greatest spectacle sport in the history of the world, is not just a thing that entices and appeals to people who are the dregs or who are, for lack of a better term, rednecks or whatever. Professional wrestling is a very refined and cultured endeavor, and it appeals to a lot of other intellectual and cultural pursuits, from rock and roll to theater to dance to theology, philosophy, mythology. We say this all the time on our show that pro wrestling is like the modern day morality plays of the medieval days. It's like modern day Canterbury Tales. And every now and again they'll throw some subtle things in there that for those who have ears to hear, you pick up on and appreciate. So we're so happy to be part of This Is the NWA, and it's gonna be exciting, man. I can't wait to see where it goes.
I was watching the Zicky Dice episode, and I thought to myself, like, every episode, one recurring theme that I've noticed is Piper's love for theater, and I also love theater very much, but especially for the Phantom of the Opera. Like, she got a little testy with you, and you even dared to not consider Phantom of the Opera like the greatest musical of all time. And I thought to myself, if she keeps this up, we're eventually just going to have, like, the NWA is the cast of Phantom of the Opera, and we're just going to have that.
Oh, man. So Will and Gary, if you had to cast yourself in the Phantom, who would you be?
Oh, I'd definitely be the Phantom just so I could cover my face, probably. But it'd be the harder singing roles.
Piper has had a Gary Horn crush since the post-show reviews, man, the Powerrr post shows that we started jumping on.
Well, that's very sweet. I appreciate that, but still, I'd cover my face. Just probably mainly to hide the singing ability, I imagine, just to make sure nobody knows who that is.
Yeah, and I don't have an answer, because let's just get a couple things out of the way now. I've actually never seen Phantom of the Opera in any form. I'm not proud of that. That's not a stance I've taken. I've just never gotten around to seeing it. I've also never seen Star Wars, any of them. So I just want to go ahead. I hope that doesn't put off listeners or viewers. But I just have to be honest.
You've never seen Phantom. You've never seen Star Wars. And up till like 3 weeks ago, you'd never seen any of the NWA. And listen, here you are on the most important podcast in NWA wrestling.
It's a Cinderella story, man. I know.
Well, there are children in your household. Why have you never seen Star Wars?
Listen, it's on the table. But it became one of those things that was almost like my brand after a while, like with my friends who were like big Star Wars fanatics. And here's why. I won't go on about this for a long time, because this is not on our list of things to talk about. But
it is now.
I think for me, I just know that it's not going to live up to the hype. Okay, and I always compare this to professional wrestling. Hang on, I always compare this to professional wrestling, because I have friends who think it's laughable that I, in my 30s, am a fan of professional wrestling. And I tell them, dude, I have been watching professional wrestling since I was 5 years old. This is part of my life. And I think that's a lot of people's story as well with Star Wars. I don't currently have that story, so I don't know if I jump in now, if it's going to mean the same thing to me as it did to you guys who saw it growing up when it was like the greatest thing ever. So,
well, fair enough, Will, and I hear what you're saying, but let me tell you, Piper has only been aware of Star Wars for some time, but it's like it resonated with her. I think there's something in our human nature and psyche that it resonates with, and it's so much so that, like, when somebody disappoints her, or we're trying to, when their friend makes her mad, and we teach our children to always be charitable. If someone's being mean or whatever, you be more diplomatic. And we always say it's like Darth Vader. Darth Vader is misunderstood. Perhaps, Piper, you're misunderstanding Madeline, or you're misunderstanding Harper. You know what I mean? So you got to give it a shot, man. I mean,
my wife is not a nerdy person, and I'm sitting here, and she just sent me the good night text, and it was like, "Are you going to be on there for 3 hours again?" And I'm like, "No, it's not going to be 3 hours." Will's never seen Star Wars, and she immediately replies back. She's like, "What? Why is he such a weirdo?"
Oh man, listen, maybe I'll set up, maybe this can become a thing. We can turn it into a promotional thing. If we can get so many comments, or maybe you guys can start a petition or something.
Here's the thing, Will, and I'm coming at this from the perspective of an educator. There's a great educator named Deborah Pickering. Most public school teachers know her. She's huge. She had special needs children. and they couldn't serve those kids at her particular school because the needs of her children were so profound. And she said, you know what I did? I pulled them out and I homeschooled them for a year. One of the things that I did that I made part of my curriculum was showing them the Times Magazine's 100 most important movies of all time, just because of the background knowledge. Background knowledge is so important. And I think with things like Star Wars and Star Trek and Indiana Jones and Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, you're going to miss out on a lot of wrestling if you don't have that background knowledge. So I'm going to challenge you as one of our co-hosts to go back and start feeding yourself with that, because there's so many subtle things that wrestlers bring in to help move their story along that are drawn from the greater culture. And Star Wars is big, man. Star Wars is very, very intrinsically connected to the world of professional wrestling, the whole heels and faces. And I think, like, even with like Strictly Business, you go back to the whole Sith and Jedi thing, and this may not mean anything to you, but, you know, there's a big debate among Star Wars aficionados about, is this good versus evil? And there's a group that says, no, it's not. This is a different view of justice. And my argument has always been that there are no heels in the NWA. There are no heels. They have a different sense of justice and self-promotion, but you don't have baby faces and heels like you might in a carnival production like the WWE. So.
Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and crap on you all night. Well, it was just that one blew me away, and not to even belittle Phantom, which is also worth seeing if you're a fan of musicals and music in general. But Star Wars just always felt like a huge cultural thing. Like, it just feels like that's one of those things that's like part of being an American, for crying out loud.
I mean, Osama bin Laden, man. Osama bin Laden has seen Star Wars, bro.
Oh my gosh. Well, this took a turn.
Well, what's even more fun about all of this right now is I want to go to our next point right now that I have on the list, and I think it's absolutely perfect, because coming off of talking about Star Wars and Phantom and the deep character roots and all of these things, and talking about fine young ladies like Piper and just being educational and raising our children right. The next point on the list is there was a video called Fashion Nova Bikini Haul. Camille tries on swimsuits.
Oh gosh.
I'll throw that over to you guys.
Pass.
Well, I'm gonna pass too, man, because Tanya, the lovely Tanya caught me watching that.
Oh no.
Plus, dude, I was just like, so yeah. Now, Camille is one of the when you talk about the talent-driven content, Camille is a superstar, man. Her and Thunder Rosa and Question Mark and Super Stevens with putting out the stuff to keep sustaining us. Camille is a workhorse, and she's gorgeous. She's a phenomenal athlete, and man, that's all I'm gonna say about that. Because Tanya's gonna see this video.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good cover. That's called CYA. That's what we call that in the biz, I think. Will, do you have anything extra to add about Camille? It's her work ethic, at least.
As is the trend in the last couple of points, I have not seen this video, so I don't have any reference. And I feel like at this point, if I see that video and don't see Star Wars first, I may not understand it.
I don't want to. You got a point. I was gonna say, like, I don't want to put it over too much, but this could also very well be one of those cultural events, just like Star Wars.
Okay. In that Times top 100 list,
right? Make sure you check out Camille's
Well, you got
bikini video.
Things, man. You would appreciate like you appreciate wrestling on its own merits, and I know you're a cultured guy who's informed and all that too. But don't just make time to go watch Camille. You will enjoy it. But,
okay, so let's get down to the real. So here's the real question coming from this. I can only watch one thing. Do I watch Star Wars or Camille?
Well, for the show, man, I have to say Camille. It's more important for this YouTube channel that you've seen the Camille video. So,
all right,
and that's your excuse for the wife. So just sit her down and your young son watch the Camille.
I'm sure that's a flawless plan, Gary.
Yeah. Well, you can obviously tell which one of us doesn't have any children in the house right now. I will say.
So Gary, what were your thoughts?
No, Camille. I appreciate Camille that she is putting out content, and that's very cool on her end. The wife actually watched this video with me, so she was there, and she was impressed with Camille just like I was, and and she was looking at the swimsuit she had from the female perspective. It's basically Camille ordered a bunch of swimsuits that she thought looked kind of cute, so she's trying them all on, and she models them all. So basically that's what the video is, and she's deciding which one's her favorite. And the wife was just like, I don't know how she doesn't think that all of these look good. So,
right.
Good for
and
her.
From an artistic perspective, I think every human being can appreciate Camille in a bathing suit. So
yeah, there you go.
This is all business, strictly business.
And so, as someone who has a daily internet show that sometimes struggles for content, do I need to do a bathing suit try-on?
No.
Okay.
I say go for it, bro. I'm in, man. I say go for it.
Do you want this channel to grow?
Man. It's 2020, man. Let's do it.
I mean, it does. There is a bit of it that does sound appealing, especially if I don't know. Camille might have high standards like Nick Aldis, but especially if you ordered the same bikini haul, I think there's something there. You gotta throw those on.
Oh man.
Anyway, we'll leave it with this. Tom Latimer, I see you, brother. You're doing great. The next thing I wanted to mention was I was lucky enough to be a guest on the Nation show for Busted Open Radio fandom. Like you want to talk about a rabid fan base as well. Dave LaGreca and the Busted Open Radio with Mark Henry and Bully Ray and Tommy Dreamer. Those guys have a huge rabid fan base, and there is a fan-led show called The Nation. And it was very nice of them the other night to have me on, and we talked about Superpower and Carnyland and just NWA in general. The goal was, and maybe this is because I ramble, but the goal was I had 45 minutes for my piece, and we ended up talking for like an hour and 15. So maybe this is the trend. Maybe I just talk too much. But anyway.
It's on brand for you.
Yeah. But they seemed they said they were having a good time, that they just wanted the whole show to be about the NWA by the time it was done. But they had to move on to the WWE and the AEW and all of the other stuff. But that was a lot of fun. So if you guys haven't checked out the Nation show, they do a lot of stuff, and they're also trying to give props to the NWA where they can. They cover all of wrestling, but very cool stuff over there. Joe from North Carolina, I forgot his last name, honestly, but that's who he is on Twitter. He leads the show there, and Vanessa and TJ and WWE Front Row on Twitter joined us for this one as well, who is – first time I ever met him was at Crockett Cup 2019, and so we got to talk a little bit about that. But they're all pals with LaGreca and run that thing, and it was a lot of fun. Anyway, so shout out to those guys.
Yeah, and David LaGreca appeared on your show, Gary. And,
that's a good point.
Gave a great interview in which he expressed his deep sympathies and appreciation for our organization and for our Real World's champion. And when you have an ally in David LaGreca, you're on top, because this is a guy who's not afraid to shoot straight and say what he thinks and feels. And there's credibility there when you've got David LaGreca on your side, and he is firmly in the camp of the NWA. So. That's
awesome. Yeah, I love that about him. And he says straight up in that interview that, obviously their show is, I think they're like one of the most listened to shows on Sirius XM or something like that. So that was kind of cool. Just like it started off from nothing, just like convincing his boss to give him like 30 minutes to talk about wrestling, to now they're like 3 or 4 hours daily or something. And, but to talk about that, he knows where the money lies, like as far as the most popular brands that you have to talk about, but he has no problem saying straight up every single day his favorite show to watch is NWA Powerrr. That's the one that he looks forward to the most. So, and he's never regretted watching an episode, I think is exactly kind of how he puts it, that,
Yep.
the other ones have their ups and downs, but he loves NWA Powerrr every single week. The next point I wanted to bring up, guys, is, we're going to go back to the champ for a second. I put this as a separate point, but I wanted to make sure we got it in there, and that's the Nick Aldis interview with What Culture Wrestling. Will did a daily show on his 3 takeaways from the interview, which was definitely worth taking a look at. Rob, I think you've seen this. Did you see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we've all seen it, and I just think it's worth a mention because, credit where it's due. I want to do a good interview myself, but these guys nailed it. This interview with Nick Aldis is one of the best, and he is just open and ready to talk. It feels like he just goes into all sorts of stuff. It felt like I was going to school, listen to him just talk about his thoughts on wrestling in general, and then getting some insight into his choices with his persona and that sort of thing. But anyway, it's worth a listen if you haven't heard it or watch. Check out that What Culture interview. What'd you guys think?
Yeah, and it flowed so naturally, like him talking. It felt like a conversation. It didn't feel like an uptight interview. A lot like your interviews, Gary, that people say they're very down to earth. They feel like it's a conversation more than a sit down formal interview. I felt that way about this one, and I'll put over What Culture because. This is what I tell people. So I don't watch WWE, but I listen to What Culture, and that's how I know what's happening in the WWE, because those guys, they do daily podcasts, and that was part of the inspiration for me to do daily content, because they do daily podcasts. Some are shorter than others, but they cover WWE and AEW news, and it really resonates with me because those guys are real wrestling fans as well. And so I won't talk too much about them, but I thought in the interview, the biggest takeaway for me was the fact that, and I didn't say this in my video because I think this might have been something that jumped out maybe after you and I talked about it, Gary, or after I watched it a second time, but just Nick Aldis talking about the realness of the feuds in NWA versus bigger companies, and he didn't say that explicitly. He didn't say, hey, our feuds are better than WWE, but he was just talking about these logistics of if your feud is built on hate, that doesn't really resonate with a lot of people, because a lot of us don't really hate someone, right? But if it's built on a credible, real storyline, such as, we were talking about Marty Scurll and Nick Aldis last night because we all watched the Crockett Cup 2019 together. And, that felt real because it's two friends. One guy's jealous of what the other guy has, his success. That feels real. I can relate to that. I've been jealous of success of friends before. And so, it wasn't just this blind hatred, like, oh, suddenly I hate you and I'm going to hate you all the way up until next Sunday night, And so, that was something he said that really stuck with me, and it's kind of caused me to look at storylines a lot differently and to really feel that realness of like NWA storylines, because that feels kind of how they're built.
Yeah, he.
Excellent.
Go ahead, Robert. Sorry.
Oh no, I'm sorry. It's I also liked how everything you said, Will, is exactly what I was thinking, and I also like how. So for me, growing up during the Crockett days in the '80s, the NWA never acknowledged the WWF and vice versa. They never acknowledged the AWA. Well, from time to time, you would have some NWA, AWA crossover stuff, but basically, you had 3 or 4 big entities that acted as though they're the only ones that existed. And so for me, it's because, it's always been like, man, I don't want to ask this guy about this because I don't want to violate protocol and this and that. But one thing I always like about Nick Aldis in his interviews is he's not afraid to pull back the curtain and talk about who he would like to see arrive in the NWA, like he does in this interview, or, these talents and these other promotions that he appreciates. So again, going back to what we said earlier, Nick Aldis is not a phony, man. He is who he is, and he will tell you if there's a valid talent or a genuine talent somewhere else that would be a good fit. He will let you know. And you're spot on, Will, about the whole rivalry thing. Like when you see Aldis and Skrull go at it, there's no way, point A, that Skrull is ever going to win the NWA World's title. But it's a heck of a feud, man, and it's a legitimate. These guys are real friends who really care about each other. There's real affection there, and there's real legitimate competition. It is a true prize fight.
Yeah, I actually LOL'd at one point in the interview, which is when he talks about, he says, obviously my wife's Mickie James, and he's like, he's like, it's always funny to see to me how some people will react in certain scenarios that he's kind of put off by the reaction of like, in a WWE match where someone is perfectly framed and they get mad about something, and then it's just like it stays on them for an extended period of time while they just stand there breathing and looking off in the distance, and they're perfectly centered on the frame. And he's just like, that's not what real stuff looks like. He's like, that's never how it actually is. He's like if he's like, I've been in situations where like somebody says something out of the way to Mickie, and I have to be like, whoa, step back for a second. Like, hang on. That's, and I have to get up in front. And he's like, but it's never like, he's like, imagine if, somebody says that something out of the way to Mickie, and then I just stand there like breathing like a maniac, like just, and he's like, people are going to be like, what is wrong with this guy? And why is she with him? And that made me laugh. Like, I was like, God, I don't know that I'd ever really considered it even that much. I mean, obviously you can feel the authenticity of something, but just hearing him put it that way, it was really entertaining to me. Guys, we only got a few more things to run down before we get to them. And just want to say one more time, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already and you're watching this thing. We appreciate everybody out there who watches any of our content. This is really cool, this hashtag NWA fam community we've got going on. And if you stay tuned till the end, we actually have a way for you to interact even more with the NWA fam community. In fact, it's our last point I want to get to tonight. And ways that you can contribute, like you can help us decide what we talk about on stuff like This Is the NWA Weekly. But we'll get there. We've got a couple more points right before there. I want to talk about the Masked Fan next up. Robert Stinson, I know you've been very encouraging to the Masked Fan with what he's been doing. Will, I'm not sure how much of his stuff you've seen so far, but the Masked Fan is a guy who showed up. I think I first met him at NWA Powerrr tapings, and he, as you may or may not have imagined, wears a mask. And he says he's ? Son. And dude legit keeps that mask on the whole entire time. We had a meetup before the last Powerrr tapings, and I remember, hit us up on Twitter to say like, oh, where are you guys going to be at? Let's go have drinks. Like, let's hang out or something. And we were going to be hanging out at this one place, this bar. And he actually called them ahead of time to be like, are you guys going to be okay that I show up with a mask on? And so he got the okay for them to expect that he would be there. But anyway, I don't know the guy's real name. I don't know anything about him. I don't even know what he really looks like. But Masked Fan is putting out some video content. He apparently is dealing with a lot of different things, especially with depression and that sort of thing, the struggles with that. And he's choosing to channel that into this series called #FreeTheMask. And it's been 7 or 8 parts or something. I think he just had like a series finale basically on that. But it is really well done, I got to say. What do you guys think about that?
Again, coming at it from the perspective of an educator, you look at in the broader culture. Let me lay this context out first. You look at the Batman movies and with like the Joker and all that, how these films take on the characteristic or the zeitgeist of the time, and now this latest film with Joaquin Phoenix, how the character of the Joker is really. He's drawn out, painted through the prism of mental health and that kind of thing. And mental health is one of those things that is just people are just in the last few years getting comfortable addressing and talking about. And I see it every day in my kids. Somebody, I think Tim Elmore or Ruby Payne or one of these educators are like, you know, the amount of mental stress and anxiety that kids deal with these days is analogous to the kind of mental stress and anxiety that mental patients dealt with in the 50s and 60s that went to asylums, you know. And so mental health is a real thing, and I'm just so thrilled and happy that someone like the Masked Fan would have the courage to go out there and draw this connection between pro wrestling and as a conduit for expressing and relieving some of this anxiety and sharing this, because you know me, I mean, the Stinsons are all about connecting professional wrestling to the broader culture, to every aspect of human life. And I think, you know, when I'm raising my girls, I have four children. I have two older kids, a daughter and a son in college, and I have my two younger ones. And professional wrestling has always been part of our life, and we've always used it as an illustrative tool to teach life lessons. The Masked Fan is doing something that I've never seen ever before, and that is drawing the connection between professional wrestling and mental health and depression, and the whole concept of the mask and the various masks that he wears is different ways for him to express himself, and that mask being a comfort. And at some point, I talk to the Masked Fan almost every day. He and I are friends personally outside of the world of the National Wrestling Alliance. And at some point, he is going to unmask. You know, we're leading up to this where he's ready to reveal who he is and peel back the layers. But the Masked Fan, I mean, for all the content out there, whether it's us, whether it's Adam Rotella, whether it's J. Cal, whether it's whatever, man. I mean, for me, like from just a pure human perspective, the most important thing being put out right now is the Masked Fan stuff. It is amazing. And, you know, for people who don't know, or it might come off as a little strange, but give it a chance, give it a listen, and try to open your heart and hear where he's coming from. This is a guy who is bearing his soul and expressing himself and saying, look, wrestling is giving me the ability to come out, and it is my escape. It's you know, it's an escape. It's not an escape, actually. It's a release for me. It's freeing me, and that's the whole concept behind the Free the Mask thing. I mean, I love it. I absolutely love it.
Oh, yeah, it's on my list of things to watch for sure. After Rob, I saw you tweet out a link to it this week, and I bookmarked that to watch for sure. And I you know, for me, we are very big on mental health in my household as well. My wife is actually a professional life coach, and she has degrees in psychology. She has a master's degree in counseling. So it is a very frequent topic of conversation in our household about mental health, dealing with depression, anxiety, and things like that. And so, you know, just hearing the context that you just gave, Rob, I love one of the things that my wife and I do talk about a lot is that, you know, you do have to find a healthy way to process your emotions, your anxieties, things like that. And it sounds like he has found a really healthy way, a way that involves a lot of community, because community is a big aspect of it. And that's something that my wife talks about a lot, is that, you know, you've got to get in a community, a supportive community. And, you know, personally, I've never been in a more supportive community than this NWA fam that I've become a part of recently. And so I love seeing the reception that he's getting, the encouragement. You know, it's going to be great, you know, to find out who he is and all this stuff. And I think it's super brave, you know, what he's doing. And so, yeah, I'm really intrigued by the whole concept. And as I said, it's definitely a must watch for me over the next couple of weeks. I'm a big proponent of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really easy watch, I should add. I mean, they're all very short, easily digestible clips, you know, like, I mean, probably like a, hey, it's Will Daly, like as far as lengthwise goes. I mean, in general, most of them I think are around that length. So, but I mean, just from being a movie buff myself, just seeing the technical physical skill improve over the period of Freak of the Mask. It's just been impressive to me. Like by the time we got to this latest one, I was like, man, this guy's a filmmaker. It is pretty impressive. Like I was like, this guy, he's got some skills. I love it. I love seeing that growth and that he's putting this to use because he's got a talent there that deserves to be on display, and I'm happy to see him doing it. The next thing I wanted to mention, guys, is Thunder Rosa, who has her own YouTube channel as well. And she's going to help us round out the top here, the women's champion. She has put out 2 videos this week, if you haven't seen them. One's a nice little clip, like a montage kind of piece that was very, very well done. And I don't know who's doing that, if it's her, if it's Brian Cervantes or whoever. It's a very nice job talking about just how she holds that title, and she's the face of the company, and she's coming from a place where she has been criticized for everything under the sun, like her size, her skin color, the way she walks, how she talks, and just what she looks like in general. I remember in the interview I got to do with her talking about that she was never going to be like a big boobed, like super tall chick, like she was like, and she's an older woman, not, as far as that goes, but like, she's not some early 20s supermodel. And so she's like, all these things have been critiques that she's taken over the years, and she's learned to put those behind her and move on. And now she considers herself the face of the NWA, and she's she calls herself, as she does, La Mera Mera. She is not to be messed with, and you better be on your game if you're going to come for that title. It's just a really, really cool video, I thought. Did you guys happen to see that one?
Yeah, and I love that. Much like we talk about with Nick Aldis, I mean, I think that the women's title should be getting the same kind of spotlight. And I think she's doing a really great job of it, telling that backstory, really helping me as a new fan buy into her as a champion. She's representing herself really well. She's elevating the title while she does it, which is at the end of the day what it's all about. I mean, you want those belts to look as prestigious as they possibly can. And so content like this accomplishes that purpose in my mind. I loved it.
Oh man, Thunder Rosa! We love Thunder Rosa in our house, and that's not to throw shade on anybody, because we think the world of Allison Kay too. I think Allison Kay was a phenomenal world champion with a great run. Probably not her last run. I'd love to see Thunder Rosa and Allison Kay do a series of matches. You got Marty Bell in there. I mean, the women's division in the NWA is phenomenal. But Thunder Rosa, gosh, man, I mean, you're right. She's a mom. She's got kids that are approaching, if they're not in their teens yet, they're quickly approaching that. And but she is a gorgeous, beautiful woman who is a legitimate athlete who's been involved in MMA, who is, she is a go-getter. Her look is so intriguing and unique, and yet she's so accessible. You know what I mean? Like, she came out with the drums, and she was so mysterious at first. But who would have thought that during this crisis, the COVID-19 shutdown and all that the most accessible person in the world would have been Thunder Rosa. And she has really elevated her brand, and in the process has elevated the whole company. And I look forward to seeing that, 600, 700, 800 day reign of Thunder Rosa, man. We love her. She is La Mera Mera. She is the queen. Long live the queen.
Speaking of, as far as you were talking about that accessibility of her, I mean, the other thing she's really great at on her YouTube channel is this going live streaming and interacting with the fans, communicating with them during chat, that sort of thing. She's been really good about that. And it really opened too about some issues she's had with it, as far as YouTube giving her trouble and that sort of thing. But in her past couple of live chats, this week's, I believe she is with her son, who is named Anakin, which will mean nothing to Will. But
I get it. I
Boom, Gary.
that's the thing though, is like, and here's the thing, you guys are right. There is enough Star Wars, and not to take the conversation back here, but in the culture that I get the references without ever having seen the movie. I'm not saying I'm not going to see the movie. I know Anakin. I know that stuff. I know. Back to Thunder Rosa.
Anyway, well, she does do a video this week with Anakin. It's the "How well do you know me" thing, where they get to answer questions about each other. She's done that with Brian, her husband, as well, and those are a lot of fun. Her last video, though, to touch on one quick thing that Rob mentioned, is she announced that she is taking another MMA fight too, and so she has entered into serious training for that, because she is determined that she will not lose this next MMA fight. She will defeat whoever's in front of her, but she has already, I guess, signed the dotted line that she is on board and it's happening. So pretty cool stuff, just from Thunder Rosa, not only just in the wrestling ring, but she's out there whipping that tail in the octagon too. I teased early on that we had a way for you guys to interact with us a little bit better and interact with the NWA fam, and also to offer us suggestions about any kind of content you want to see. So if you've stuck around this far, hopefully you've hit subscribe, and you should join our Discord. And that's our final point, or the last one that I have written down here, is that we should talk about the Discord. Guys, we have a growing family on the Discord. Rob is figuring it out. First step is going to be getting him to add a profile picture. Next step is going to get him to interact. And but no, the Discord's fun, man. We've got a Hall of Champions on there. Our buddy Roscoe in the Discord has been. It blew my mind. At first, I was on my computer at the time he started like messing around in that room, and it just kept saying like, Roscoe uploaded a picture. Roscoe uploaded a picture. Roscoe uploaded a picture. And I'm like, am I going to have to mute our channel? Like, because what is this guy doing? But it turns out Roscoe ended up changing this thing to the Hall of Champions, because Roscoe ended up uploading photos in order of every world's heavyweight champion in the NWA. And I just thought
it was amazing.
Yeah, it's really, really cool to go back now and just like scroll through it. You get to see each and every champion the NWA's ever had holding that 10 pounds of gold, and that's awesome. Big Gold's in there for a little bit, obviously, and whatever was before. But anyway, Discord. Anything to add to that, guys?
Oh man, it's been great. I say this on a few of my videos, but I do this for the community. I mean, I do this for the opportunity to talk to you guys. I do this for the opportunity to talk to people on Twitter. And then we started this Discord for that same reason, just to have, an outlet every day to talk about, currently, yeah, it's revolving around wrestling, but I mean, we may add some channels in there for just general life talk, family talk, things like that, just to encourage that community. And it's been great. I mean, it was a little bit of a slow start the first couple of days. It was like just Gary and I talking to each other. But
it's worth it, because Will actually responds in the Discord, and he will not respond to a text message. So,
well, I have my priorities straight, except for the Star Wars thing. But listen, we got the link out. We added a bunch of people. And man, the conversation just blew up a couple of days ago, and it was just a lot of fun. I mean, it's a lot of fun to hear, why people love the NWA, what their favorite parts are. And Gary, as you mentioned, like it'll be a great outlet for us to pull from for content for this show, to be in touch with the whole NWA fam, not just the three of us, three of our opinions. And as I've been saying, keep pushing us ideas and your thoughts on stuff, and you might get a shout out on here because something might strike us as, hey, we should talk about that.
I thought Rob was going to say something, but he didn't.
Well, like I said, I'm new to Discord. I've kind of joked in the past, I don't believe in up till recently, I haven't believed in using any kind of technology. I have a whole article on my website about that, and have created an app for digital free alternatives to technology. So,
Well, we're not gonna
with.
bully anybody. We're not gonna bully you into being a part of it. But just so you know, I mean, Rob is the big selling point, and he is in there. So you might have to at him directly to get him to notice it. But speaking of shout outs, I mean, we should shout out.
Hey, Rob, if you will become active in that Discord, I'll watch Star Wars.
I'm in, bro. I got it. I got in there last night, and so
I'm talking active. I'm talking like 5 messages a day.
5? That's all?
Yeah, if
Dude,
you can
it's
do
easy,
it.
man. Yeah, I do like 17, 18, 19, 20 tweets a day. So I can do that. That's easy.
You can hop on that app and just write a couple of sentences. It shouldn't be too tough.
Yeah,
and don't just share your tweets.
Honestly, part of the problem is like I found out I had two logins. I had one through my Walker County Schools account, and then one through my. So y'all are interacting. I'm like, dude, I don't see anything going on Discord. So half of it is like, just me being logged in incorrectly, But
I will say it's been pretty convenient for me because like when the conversations going on there, like when hopefully my work doesn't hear this, but like when I'm actually at work or whatever else, it's easier than like messing around on my phone. Like I can see something that's relevant pop up. I can actually just type back really quick. So that's a lot of fun. But yeah, Discord's.
So are you guys primarily are you behind your computer screens, or are you on your phone with Discord mostly?
I'd say I'm on the computer most of the time when I'm doing it. I mean, if I'm hanging out with the wife or something, though, I might, I'll obviously get the notifications if something's going on or something, so I can treat it like texting. My wife doesn't
let me look at my phone when I'm around her.
My wife does not like it either, but yeah. So.
No, I got to be like, man, I got to go to the bathroom. Act like I got to go to number 2 or something.
My wife doesn't mind, but she's cool. So.
Will, you are
earning those points today, guys. We got by the time this airs, we got Carnyland coming up. We got a lot of stuff to look forward to this week, so we got to start taking our notes on everything we got to talk about for the next round of This Is the NWA Weekly. But you guys want to talk about anything else before we end this one? Carnyland, any other topics I missed? I was going to give a shout out to Wrestling with the MMA, by the way, in the Discord. I did want to mention that he's been really active, and he posted his resist video the other day. We shared it in the Discord, so it's worth a look. He's the strictly resistance, the anti-Aldis faction. So anyway, so worth a look.
That, 3 quick points. One, Carnyland. I think I want to promote my man Brian Solomon's book. Let me see if we can see this. This is Pro Wrestling FAQ.
Well done.
And I think we have some hints to Carnyland in this book in the first 3 chapters. This is one of the most important books ever written on professional wrestling. So I'd encourage everybody. And if you look at my copy, it's heavily noted, heavily dreaded. This is a great resource. So that's point 1. Get Brian Solomon's book. Pro Wrestling
I'd add to that, Rob, before you get to point 2, that Pro Wrestling FAQ, he's not kidding. I'm working on another project for this channel, and it's been a excellent reference book. So good that, in fact, I had it on Kindle as the way I bought it was digitally, and I just got sick of dealing with it on Kindle. I was like, I need to just have this book on a shelf. So I purchased the paperback version as well, so it's on its way.
Man, my pages are like, they're circled, highlighted. This is a heavily written in book. And I have another copy that I don't write in, but this is it, man. Get this book. If you want some hints about Carnyland, look in this book. I'm telling you. Point 2, we can't forget to mention Gary Horn's freshly trimmed beard today.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there it is. This thing was getting out of hand. I was going to let it go until quarantine, but my job keeps pushing back when that's going to end. So we were going to be going back into the office on June 1st, but I was let know last night that that's now June 15th at the earliest. So it's like, all right, well, this is not going to get any better. Which, Rob, by the way, this leads into an excellent time to mention For those who don't know, and I've been terrible about this on the live streams and the video recordings, but it was during a process for that whole day that I was just cleaning up in general. And so it's a great opportunity for me to mention our sponsor over at manscaped.com. Those guys have been really good to us. They've got the Lawnmower 3.0 with a nice LED light, very quiet mower. And nicks and cuts are a thing of the past when you're dealing with Manscaped. Those guys have created a heck of a product. And if you go to manscaped.com, use the code NWAPod, you get 20% off and free shipping on anything at the website, so manscaped.com. Thank you for allowing for that plug, Rob.
Yeah, man. And then point 3, final point, and then I'll turn it over to Will for his closing arguments. Back to wrestling with the MMA, I just want to send a big shout out to our brothers. You know, we get on here and we have fun with each other, but the Strictly Resistance crew, they are dear friends. The Fortson, Wrestling with the MMA, Pipe Picasso, they provide a constant, you know, a nig to what we're saying. But these guys are great guys, man. They are all about the NWA. And if you listen to the Fortson's episode of NWA Stranger with Rotella, he understands where Nick Aldis stands in the pecking order. He knows that our real world's champion is the real deal, and all those guys do. But they are putting out good content, and they provide a good counterbalance to myself and you and Will and Elder Sauer and the other guys that stand with Aldis. So I wanted to give a shout out to those guys.
It's pretty impressive. Like, I mean, Fortson's another good example, and Wrestling with the MMA and Pipe Picasso, like those guys you mentioned, but I mean, it's just like randomly out of nowhere, you'll have a guy like Fortson pop up with some freaking video of him in a temple, like in a robe and just challenging whoever, challenging Aldis and the resistance. It's just like, where does all of this come from? No other wrestling company has this. Like, it's amazing. You get involved in the NWA, like the hashtag NWA fam, and there is just a steady flow every single day of audience-produced content that is just out there, keeping the storylines of the NWA alive. And it's God, it just, you mentioning that, it just blew my mind again, just how incredible this crew of people are.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah, so I'll join you guys in putting over Wrestling with the MMA. I also want to mention Andrew McKinney. Those two have really been very active putting over Hey It's Will daily on Twitter, and so I am super grateful to those guys. They're not just retweeting; they're actually posting the link and putting their own promo in there for that show, and so that has meant a lot to me. So thank you to those guys. Also, WWE Front Row sent me some really cool photos that were original of his from the Crockett Cup in 2019 this morning, because we watched that last night. I watched it for the first time, so that was really cool this morning to go through and look at some of those original photos. So again, I love interacting with all of you on Twitter. If you don't follow me, it's at Hey It's Will, HEYITSWIL 1L. Connect with me on there. I can't say it enough. I want to get the community going and interact with you guys. But really, those three especially really have appreciated the connection I've had.
Yeah, Rob, make sure you drop your how do people follow you on the interwebs?
I am on Twitter at rstinson4. So don't forget that 4. There's a special significance to that number.
That's the year he was born.
The year 04. I'm on Facebook as Robert Stinson. I am on Instagram. I'm really just getting into Instagram. I'm finding that's a way for me to connect with some of our talent. But I'm there. And so, look me up, follow me. You follow me, I follow you. That's kind of my general mantra. You give me a follow, I give you a follow. So
sweet. Well, I am at This Is Gary Horn on all of the stuff. And the podcast, as always, is at the NWA Pod. It's real simple, at the NWA Pod. And just make sure you subscribe on the YouTube. We're really trying to build that up because there's a lot of cool content coming out there. But in the bios of any of those social medias, you can also find links to the podcast So most of this content you'll start also seeing in the podcast feed, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your stuff. It's there. Anything else, guys, before we wrap this thing up?
Just ready to find out what Carnyland is. I'm ready for Tuesday.
So am I. And I can't wait to talk to you fellas about it once we know. It's going to be exciting. Thank you, everybody who listens. We love you all. And you have a good night or day, morning, whatever, whenever you're watching this. Have a good one of those things.
Good time.